Hello and welcome to the Green Collar Careers Podcast. I'm your host, Jose Almanzar, and for today's episode, I'm speaking with Mark Johnson, an environmental engineer with Geosyntec Consultants. Mark is a senior principal and professional engineer at Geosyntec, which is a national environmental consulting firm. Mark has over 25 years in the industry and specializes in environmental management, due diligence, and site investigations. In this interview, Mark and I discuss his educational and professional background, what he does as an environmental engineer, intangible characteristics he looks for when interviewing candidates, and he provides some sage advice for job seekers looking to enter the environmental professions. I had a blast connecting with Mark, and I think you'll like this episode as much as I enjoyed recording it. Enjoy. Hey everyone, and welcome to the podcast. I am so excited for today's guest, Mr. Mark Johnson, Senior Principal at Geosyntec Consultants. Mark, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
So Mark just disclosed to me that he turned 20 this year. But he's
You clearly were not a math major in school. Did they not have math in law school? You get 20 plus 20 again, and then another 10 on top.
Hey, listen, man, listen, us bald guys got to stick together. So
there you go.
So Mark has been with Geosyntec for how many years, Mark?
I'm in my 14th year.
14th year, but you've been practicing as an environmental engineer for
since school. So we're in like 27, 28, somewhere around there since the mid 90s.
My goodness. Do you get a Rolex when you hit 30 years?
I don't know. It used to be they gave like chairs away to people and stuff like that. I remember my dad was a lawyer, and I remember when he was always getting all sorts of nice stuff. But no, we get like a good handshake and good job well done.
So Mark, where are you located right now? Because a few years ago when we saw each other at a conference, it was in upstate New York. But now you told me earlier today that you're a little further south now, right?
Yes, exactly. So for many years and coming out of undergraduate, I was in Maryland, just outside Baltimore, Maryland for many, many years. Always had a desire to move further south, primarily for the weather, but also pace of life. So I'm actually in the Carolinas right now, physically in North Carolina right now, but we'll be soon moving to Charleston, South Carolina. Again, warmer weather, quality of life, all those things that I'm sure we'll get into more later here.
Yeah, so I've met a few people who have purchased homes in South Carolina as their second homes, like small little cottages off the beach, and just so they could vacation, and they Airbnb them to make a little side money. That over the pandemic, they turned them into their primary homes. And then there's been almost, I don't want to call it a mass exodus from New York, but people are realizing, like, why am I paying all of this in property tax and dealing with these crazy winters when, there's like little nice pockets of neighborhoods in the Carolinas. Is that what you're seeing?
Absolutely. It's funny. So I'm originally a New Englander from Rhode Island. So cold weather, it's in my blood, but you've already made a comment on my age. And the older I get, the less I like the cold, which is why, like, instead of staying in the North or Maryland, people don't even really consider the North. I guess it's sort of in the middle, but I just had that strong desire to get into sort of a warmer climate. And I think you're exactly right. I have colleagues at the company that did that exact thing. They bought their COVID house, if you will, in the Carolinas, and are now splitting time between multiple locations. It's been great, I think, for the mobility of people. Of course, the real estate market in Charleston is now like crazy, out the roof, because you get these people with the finances in New York, Chicago, places like that they're transplanting in. But I think it's just great setting down there.
No, it's fantastic. So Mark, tell us a little bit about your educational background. We know that you're an environmental engineer, but what, give us the kind of the short journey as to what led you down the educational professional background.
Sure. So, sort of ironically, when I went to college, it wasn't to do science. I went to Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. Originally, actually, I wanted to get into the international studies program. I was, aiming to be in the foreign service or something like that. And I started taking macroeconomics classes, and we spent the whole semester working on like the supply demand graph, and like literally the whole semester on one graph. I'm like, this is boring. This is awful. Like one semester, the whole thing, one graph. And then, I said, well, what else am I really interested in? And I ended up taking the, introductory geology class, and just said, like, this is it. Like this just connects with me. So actually, my undergraduate degree was geology, and then worked for a couple of years, and then went back. And that's where I got the environmental engineering master's degree. But it came from just, being interested in something, but ending up in something else, totally different.
It's so funny, Mark. And we've never discussed this, but I had almost the same experience in undergrad. I studied the high school I went to in New York City. I got exposed to environmental issues, and that's where I got my initial interest in conservation and environmental issues in high school. But when I got to college, I thought, you know what? New year, new me kind of
Hmm.
guy, and I'm gonna move away from that environmental dorky stuff. And everyone's telling me to go into finance, so I applied for and I registered for a macroeconomics course. And by the second lecture, I had to drop out of the class. I
Yeah.
couldn't take it. You're right. You spend 90 minutes looking at a y-axis and an x-axis of a supply
Yeah.
and demand chart.
I made it one semester, and I'm like, no, there's got to be something else.
Yeah,
So,
no, for sure. So did you become interested in environmental issues as a result of your geology studies, or was there something that kind of sparked an interest, leading up to it, or maybe even afterwards? What got you, into this, from a substantive point?
I think it's interesting that while I was originally thinking international studies or something along those lines, I think the environment is actually kind of always been within me. Being from New England, with actually family from Maine, and having a cabin on the lake, this kind of picturesque thing you see in the movies. The importance of the environment, clean air, clean water, all that has always been very important in me. The business side of me probably was originally thinking, my dad was a corporate attorney, my mom was in finance, and it was sort of like, well, the environment, this is back in the 80s, it was still kind of just starting out to be like an actual industry that you would do something with. So I was thinking, okay, what else can I do? And I think I kind of grew into at college to say, hey, look, the environment is important to me. It always has been. And, understanding, geology and hydrogeology and engineering principles, that satisfied kind of the right side of the brain and the left side of the brain at the same time. So I think it really was the awakening, if you will, in college to say, "Hey, no, you're a scientist. You thought you wanted to, be the ambassador to Paris, but no, you're really actually a scientist."
Yeah, yeah, no, it's and I take offense to your math comment earlier because I made it all the way I made it all the way through college calculus, all right? But I didn't become an engineer like Mark did. I pivoted to the social sciences, which didn't require a lot of math. But so Mark, Geosyntec Consultants, um, behemoth kind of company. I know there's bigger and smaller ones, but I see Geosyntec as one of the top players in the environmental consulting field, environmental engineering field. What is your role at the company? What do you do as a senior principal there in your line of work?
Sure. So Geosyntec is, I think, still somewhat unique in the field that we still hold to our lifestyle, if you will, our way of our principal operating mechanism, what we call sell, manage, do. And so a lot of the bigger firms have, pure sellers, pure doers. Smaller firms, you're kind of wearing all the hats in a small firm. My very first firm out of school, I think I was getting the paper. I was, making the coffee, fixing the copy machine. Like, you wear a lot of hats, right? But Geosyntec, we do still, live by the sell, manage, do. So as a senior principal, of course, my primary line is to sell work and manage people. I am still a technical doer as well as is everybody in the company. Outside of our core, administrative people. In fact, even our CEO is still practitioner. He's an expert witness on a lot of projects. So we are, really, that's the core of it. Is not being pigeonholed into one. Okay, that person only sells, or that person's only a doer. Don't let them in front of clients. They're an idiot. No, we really do try to have everybody. And so my primary role is to go out, win work, manage the staff that I have, and of course also because it's a professional services, there's a billable goal, and we have to execute work at the same time.
So the technical work that you do, I know, Mark and I have known each other for a few years, so I know exactly what he does, or at least have a decent idea. But Mark, can you kind of give us a description as to what your, not necessarily your day to day, but what's kind of the flavor of some of the projects that you work on?
Yeah, sure. So the type of work that I sort of try to sell and manage is, primarily in a couple different areas. Due diligence, transaction support work is one, and then litigation support work is in another. The litigation support work that involves, obviously working with attorneys such as yourself, and in some cases, preparing an expert for testifying, but reading through documents, reports, helping with legal briefings and things like that. From again the technical standpoint, I'm not a lawyer. I'm the son of a lawyer. I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night, kind of a thing. So I understand law, and that's why we work very well with lawyers. But so in litigation support work, it's a lot of taking the technical information that we understand and sort of translating it into something that can turn into legal document. And then I think the due diligence work is a lot of it. It's very similar. It's a fact finding mission. We have a week, 2 weeks, a month to go out and find out everything we can about this company that our client is buying, or in the case where we're doing a sell side, make sure we talk with the seller. Hey, is everything okay? What information do we have? A buyer is going to be doing the same thing with the scrutiny. So the kind of again, it's not like the day in day out type stuff, but a lot of it is the research. It's preparing documents, summarizing the research, and things of that nature. I hopefully that kind of answered the question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Are you now you oversee, I'm assuming you oversee certain junior people. Is that
Mhm.
are you
Yeah.
involved in the interview process for new hires that you might directly or indirectly oversee?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, one of the things I personally take, sort of pride in when I hire people. And now that I'm here in the Carolinas, I have a smaller group than when I was in Maryland. I managed a larger group there, but left that and turned that over to somebody else. I like to take part in the interviews to really see, is this person that's essentially going to become family? And when you think about it, you go in the office every day, we'll say before or after COVID, you're working with these people 8, 10, 12 hours a day, depending on, the level of work. And you go home and you see your family for a few hours, and then you go to bed and you do it all over the next day. So it's like you see these people at work in some ways, more than you see your own family. So when I go and I interview, I really worry less about skill. Okay, what did this person study in school? I mean, I like to see a decent, group of classes, a decent GPA and things that they are invested in. But it's really about, to me, the hard skill you can teach. It's about, is this a good human being? Do they have
Hmm.
integrity? Do they have some sort of moral compass? Whatever that looks like. And it may seem silly. How do you figure that out in an interview? But you'd be surprised. You can really just tell a lot about somebody by their simple body language,
Hmm.
the presentation of themselves during the interview process. So I do take a lot of pride in wanting to be involved with that. Again, I like to bringing somebody in a family and into the family. We don't want to say, oh, you're going to be here for 2 months and then we're going to fire you because it didn't fit. That's not at all what we're about.
Are you finding, and by the way, that's a really refreshing response, because I think, like you said, the diversity of classes, the good scores and the GPAs, those are almost like bare minimums that
Yeah.
I want to say almost every or many applicants that you get are going to demonstrate those things already. Are you finding it difficult? I know for a while, I want to say at the beginning and the early stages of the pandemic, finding talent was challenging. There was a large group of people that had gone through you remember the Great Resignation,
Yep.
it was titled, and the pendulum appears to have swung back. But what's your pulse on, getting either entry level or junior talent out there? Is it still, very competitive from the employer side, or is the market back to being a little saturated with talent?
I would say it's the former, not the latter.
Hmm.
And I think one of the biggest reasons is the diversity of what is in called the environmental field
Hmm.
has exponentially grown. When I think back to the early years of the environmental industry when I got involved, it was pretty much it was water, wastewater, super fun type work. Late '80s, early '90s, around then. But when you look at the full spectrum now, environmental policy becoming very important. ESG is very important. We have a very strong and very highly growing, robust ESG practice. Sustainability, all these things. Environmental justice. I know we're just barely scraping the surface at our company, and I can say that somewhat honestly. But we really would like to get more heavily involved in environmental justice across the company, right? So you look at all these other aspects, and it's become uh, very competitive out there to find talent that wants to do certain segments. I think there is still a little bit of kids coming out of college wanting to save the world, and I think there's a reality now that there are opportunities to really do that, and
Yeah,
almost
and by
literally.
the way, you don't need to do it for free or on a volunteer or be broke doing it.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think there's so many opportunities in front of students. So differentiating ourselves, which we like to do, partly through some of the things I talked about it really being a family. It is it's tough. It's challenging for us for sure.
I get at least and Mark, I'm very active on LinkedIn, and I one of the things that I like to do is make myself available to either young people that are either still in college or recent graduates, or people that have been working for a while but want to pivot into the environmental, careers. It's for me, I'm like a kid at a candy store doing the work that we do. I do it on the legal side. Obviously, you do it on the engineering side.
Yeah.
And if somebody who wants to do this kind of work but is experiencing barriers to entry or struggles, I go out of my way to make myself available as a resource, sometimes as a mentor, lowercase m, depending on how much they want to get involved with me. But you know, what are some things that people who are either close to graduating from college, or maybe they've graduated and have taken a job, but it's not their ideal job or what they're passionate about. They're just passionate about, let's just say, climate change or sustainability or the environment in a broad stroke. What are some things that you would advise, that young man or young woman or person, what are some things that they could be doing to enter the space?
So I actually basically I did this exact thing for several years, going back before COVID. At my alma mater, I was invited to there was a lecture series, and
Okay.
it was in the civil engineering department, and they would have a guest lecturer each week, and usually it was somebody talking about something like insanely insightful, like nano something, and these like brilliant guys, and then they would bring me in and the stupid guy, and I would come in and I would talk about what's it like being practicing environmental consultant. And the students, when they had the end of the year forms, they'd fill out what lecture did we like best. A lot of times they would always say mine, because I came in with like really no filter, no agenda, but just to say, hey, I've been doing this for 25, almost 30 years, however long it is. And here's what I've learned, in that time. And I think it kind of comes down to a couple of things. One is to have a bit of the Goldilocks approach, right? Sometimes things are going to not fit quite right. They're going to be too big or too small. But you'll find that thing that fits just right. And for me, it was consulting. And even more so, I mean, it's been at Geosyntec. I mean, I've been at multiple consulting firms. I've been with the government of the USGS. I've been at an insurance company. I've moved around a little bit, as anybody does in their early years. But like I said, I'm in year 14 here. I guess the main thing I would say to the students coming out is don't be afraid, to make that change. I think today's kids coming out of school today are naturally already thinking, it's not really a career. I'll try this for a little bit. I'm seeing a little bit of that, and I think that's fine. It gives you the latitude to move around a little bit, but you do have to start saying, okay, well, what do I want to do? And don't be afraid to say, look, this place is not giving me what I need. I want to try something else. And I think, that's one thing I definitely would say. The other thing is to say, always be curious, always be intellectually curious, and not afraid to take on a new challenge. The environmental market, the way it is, things that people are doing now policy wise that didn't exist 10 years ago, certainly didn't exist 30, 40 years ago. The what we call environmental is expanding so rapidly. There's so much opportunity for people to get involved with something, find their passion, and then find the workplace for it.
So you hit on something that I feel more people need to, and not just people out of college, or young professionals, but even seasoned folks like you and I, taking taking some time to actually answer the question, like, what is it that I want to do? What is it that I enjoy doing? And what are the types of people or industries that I want to be, like, either serving? Because it doesn't matter if you're a consultant, an attorney, or building a widget. You're serving something. You're serving someone. You're
Yeah.
providing some sort of service. So really sitting down and not just thinking about them while you're going on a run, like actually sitting down and writing, like, what are the three things? What do you want to do with yourself? And it might be, and it's okay if that changes over time. You change as a person. So I think that's a really good approach, and a really healthy mindset, Mark, which is, try things out. Like you said, the Goldilocks
Yeah.
kind of mentality. It's okay to try things out, and maybe it works, and that's your career for 30 years. But if it doesn't work, you can pivot in a year or two and be intellectually curious. Um, Fantastic advice. Now, what about for somebody who's been, let's say, working for a decade, and they've been, let's say, working in finance, just your typical finance kind of work. First of all, I don't even know what people in finance do. I'm going to be honest with you. I have a friend that works for a Japanese bank, and he tries to explain it to me every time, and I I consider myself a little smart, and I still, my eyes glaze over when this guy. But I'm going to use finance as an example. You've been working in finance for 10 or 15 years, and you're doing your, let's just call it, regular vanilla finance stuff for a bank. And then you watch a documentary, or you have a conversation with someone, or you read a book, or an article that really strikes a chord with you about the environment. Whatever it is. Maybe it's environmental justice. Maybe it's climate change directly related stuff. Maybe it's water issues. What's the advice that you give to that person who comes to you and says, "Hey, Mark, I think I want to work in the environment, but I don't even know where to start"?
That's a great question, and I think that's something that we see a lot of. I guess the first thing I would say would be, every skill set just about that you can think in the I guess we'll limit it mostly to kind of professional services, and things of that nature. But just about every skill set, whether it's the science background, the engineering, whatever, finance, has a role in the environmental arena. And so I'll say within a consulting firm, and I'll use us obviously as the example that I know. We get clients saying, "Hey, we know that you guys know engineering, and we're looking at considering buying this company. What else can you help us with?" And we say, "Well, They're going to need. They're taking a wood waste product and they want to turn it into a biofuel. Okay, well, you need to understand the feedstock. Where are they getting their feedstocks from? Have they look at the economics of that, the availability, the competition among other companies that are doing the same thing in the area? And we have people that have come, exactly you say, from financial backgrounds, so they understand the financial models. When the people put it in front of us, say, here's our financial model, and the average engineer is going to be like, well, that's just a lot of numbers, I don't get it. We have people, and we desire to have more of those people that understand that, so they can do some more of the front end analysis. For instance, looking at feedstock supply, sales supply, things like that, trying to
Is-
do as broad a range of services, again, within the umbrella of environmental. We don't practice law. We can't of course do that. But within the environmental, there's a lot of different aspects. So I would say if somebody's in finance, um, don't be afraid of environmental because you didn't take organic chemistry. There's plenty of people that didn't. You can absolutely add value in learning the environmental industry and then applying your financial background. 100%. That's possible.
yeah, I learned recently, and not Geosyntec, but a different consultant. They have a whole team of economists
Hmm.
that their jobs, they're not field people. They're not required to know the science and know the chemical breakdown of, the TCE into PCE and vinyl chloride. They don't, that's not their role. Their role is to crunch numbers and come up with models for, for how different, different sediment dispersions might account in different financial models in terms of, this model is going to cost this much, this next model is going to cost this much. What's the difference? What's the variation? I mean, there are roles for people doing exactly what they're doing right now in not just consulting, but government agencies obviously require specialists, companies. So, I mean, I guess the point is, don't be discouraged because you don't have the quote unquote technical science background. What might, I think what people end up finding is they get a little discouraged because they maybe feel that they are such an anomaly being and I'm going back to finance, so being a finance person who is now passionate and cares about the environment, but they've been working in finance for 10 or 15 years. And I think Mark and I are both here to tell those people, like, it's okay. You're welcome to the party as well.
Well, I think the key there is the passion. You said that their financial background, but they have a passion for the environment. Honestly, that's the main thing. We were talking before, earlier today about having integrity and then sort of some sort of a moral compass, if you will, right? And passion, I think, is part of that. What drives you? What gets you up out of bed every morning, and what points you in the right direction? And so I think if you have that passion, then the skill, okay, oh God, this guy is a professional geologist and a professional engineer and a PhD. That just means they've studied more. They've learned that skill, right? There's no rocket science to getting a PE or a PG. It's just being adept at learning information. And so you can say, well, I'll never learn all that, but maybe you don't have to, right? Because you're bringing in a piece. If we have the person that knows how to do this, and you bring that, now we have another building block.
Yeah.
And when we look at opportunities, I was actually just on a large proposal opportunity where we had a geotechnical engineer, a remediation engineer, a waste specialist. I was brought on as a cost estimating guru. We had a brownfield grant writer. We had all these different people, all these different pieces. And so, you're never going to have one project where you're going to say, I'm the only one that you need, just me, hire me, and that's it.
Yeah.
It's no, there's 10 of us, there's 8 of us, there's 5 of us, whatever the number is. Everybody has a role. They just have to have the passion to say, I want to be on this team, and let's go get it.
Yeah. And for experienced professionals, I would encourage them to, to really lean on their networks. At that point, if you've been working for 10, 15, 20 years, at that point you should have a pretty robust network of professionals that you can then sift out and pick out, let's say 10, 15, 20 people to brainstorm.
Hmm.
and kind of put your pride away, because doing the blind searching for jobs on Indeed or LinkedIn is good for inspiration and to see what's available out there. But I think, you're kind of you're taking a big chance on luck that if you apply for something that you found on the internet, that you're actually going to get a call back. I think you need to do the legwork of then exploring opportunities within your network, because there might be things that aren't even being publicized that a company like Geosyntec might be getting ready to look for, and it might be an economist, and that position might never even make it to to LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Um, so go ahead, Mark. You were going to say something.
Yeah, I think it's about doing, like you said, it's about doing that research. Back in the day, we went to libraries and everything was in a book, and that's all we had, right? But now with the internet, I sound like an idiot saying this, but there really is an endless amount of information that's free, right? So if you're that financial person, you say, I'm hearing about this thing, ESG, environmental social governance and sustainability. It seems pretty cool. The UN has their principles. They've laid them out on a website. They've got wonderful handbooks. This is exactly what we as the UN want the world to do. It's right there in front of you. You can read those. It doesn't take a degree. It just takes eyes and being able to, an open mind and read that information. So really, the amount of information is endless to learn something new.
So you mentioned the UN website and the resources from the UN. Are there any other resources that you would point, somebody who's, trying to get into this space, this environmental space, either entry level or experience? Do you have any podcasts or books or, movies, or just, anything that comes top of mind to you?
I think one of the things that's really important is to have sort of an open mind and look at multiple viewpoints. For instance, you look at the topic of emerging contaminants, and PFAS is the one that everybody talks about. We have a very, very strong PFAS practice. A lot of people doing a lot of very good work, both on the cleanup side, but also in research and development, working with universities, working with institutions. It's really the kind of the full scope. I'd say it's hard to say, well, if you want to be in the environmental world, read this book and you'll learn everything. It's opening yourself to a lot of different mindsets. There's a lot of really good documentaries which are going to have maybe one point of view. Understand that point of view, understanding there might be some bias that's leaning it one way, there might be some bias that leans something towards another way. So look at a lot of different mindsets, documentaries, books, websites, government agencies. We like to still trust that government agencies are somewhat of a leveling factor, and so global entities like the UN and the Water Environment Federation, WEF, whatever. I always get the acronym wrong, but whatever these global outlets are, those are great sources of information because they're bringing in a lot of unbiased, and different, viewpoints. So I don't know that I'd put everything on like one thing, like read this journal and you're good to go. It's just trying to get as many viewpoints as possible.
Yeah, no, that's great. And not that this is a UN sponsored show or anything like that, but I'm going to give, but if you're into, if your thing is climate change, and, I mean, the place to start is getting a hand of any of those intergovernmental panels on climate change, summaries, the policy summary, the summaries of the entire report. I would not read the entire report. I don't have that kind of time, but I would absolutely encourage people just to pick those up. I think the most recent six assessment, the summary was like 30 some odd pages. It was chock full of charts and graphs and really good data. And that's a good place to start if you're applying for things or writing a cover letter, and you can pull out some stuff from those reports, those documents that you're referencing, Mark, into your cover letter to
Absolutely.
demonstrate that you're at least doing some homework on the subject matter. Um, Mark, one last thing: if you had any final words of encouragement to again, young people that are graduating, or recent graduates of college or grad school, or seasoned professionals who want to kind of pivot into the space? What are some words that you would tell them?
I think it kind of boils down to a few things, right? Recognize that you can have more than one passion in your life, but you have to have a passion. It is a career. It's not just a job. It's not a 9 to 5 situation when you're doing something like being involved with an environmental world, if you will, whatever avenue that is. So, find your passion. Don't be afraid to have more than one passion and follow those. And I think the other thing is, don't be afraid of failure. We all have stories of, company downsizings, companies changing, the internal operations change, new boss who's terrible, like whatever. There's always going to be these sort of downsides, and so we'll call it failure moments. You cannot be afraid of those. You live past them. You end up being, in my situation now, I'm a senior principal of a very well-respected firm, having tons of adversity. At certain time periods, downsized by this place changed the mindset. Things like that are going to happen. Don't fear that. Expect it. Learn from it, grow, refine that passion, and just get up each morning with a desire to follow that passion.
Man, Mark, you said it all there. Really keep your eye on the ball, and your message that it's okay to fail is something that really resonates with me. I've been working. We spoke briefly before we were recording that I've been working on some kind of internal stuff, and that it's okay, to take a chance. I mean, I had a LinkedIn Live event, Mark, a few weeks ago. It was my first one. It was a disaster. It was a mess. Nobody.
I couldn't join it. I'm like, oh man, I want to join it. And then I saw your postings after. You're like, this is terrible. I'm like, oh, I feel awful.
It was a mess. No, and you know what? I learned from it, and that's, I mean, to your point, and that's obviously a small, that's small potatoes compared to career changes. But I took a shot on. I've taken many shots, and I've succeeded in many things, in many projects. And I've also failed. And to your point, learning, growth happens when we fail.
Yep.
The real growth, the internal growth happens when we get knocked down. When you get knocked down, just make sure you land on your ass, because you can get right back up,
Absolutely.
Mark, thank you so much. Everyone, check out Mark Johnson. He's on LinkedIn. He's also at the Geosyntec website. I know he does speaking engagements all over the country. Mark, thank you so much. Really appreciate you and your insight. And I'll make sure that we reconnect soon offline as well.
Thank you. Thank you for having me and giving me an opportunity here.
Have a good one. Hey, don't go just yet. If you like that episode, make sure to drop a like and a comment, and go ahead and subscribe to my channel and podcast. Your support and encouragement gives me the energy to continue producing this podcast. Next episode, I'll be interviewing Christine Uri, an attorney who specializes in advising companies on sustainability and ESG matters. Make sure you subscribe to this channel to get notice of when that episode drops. All right, that's it for now. Hope you have a wonderful day.